Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this week's ukulele lesson, Mika's going to be teaching you how to play Mad World. Now, I've always been a big fan of both versions of this tune. The original, which was written by Tears for Fears, plus the version that this ukulele arrangement is based off of, which is the Gary Jules take on it featured in the movie Donnie Darko. Now, Gary's version strips away the rock band element of the Tears for Fears version, and it focuses mainly on the melody and harmony and presenting it in a haunting manner. And I've got to say that Mika did an excellent job of capturing that vibe as a solo ukulele piece. Because I did get a chance to play through his arrangement in its entirety, and I have to say, first off, it's a lot of fun to play, but secondly, I think it's going to be perfect for the intermediate player. So if you've been wanting to work on a really great haunting sounding melody and harmony piece and you want to work on something that's a little bit challenging but not over the top, this is going to be perfect for you. Now, I have to say that probably the most challenging aspect of it from a playing perspective, like what our left hand has to do, is that it has a few bar chords. So if you need a little bit of a recap or refresh on proper bar chord technique and form, I'm going to put a couple links in the description box below to lessons we have that covers that topic in detail. So let's take a step back though. Let's talk a little bit about this lesson, because in this video, Mika's going to be teaching you how to play the entire arrangement. But if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, that's going to be available at this link right here. Or you can go to the site, rockclass101.com, do a search for the song's name. Now also on that page will be the really cool interactive on-screen tab here. Now this is a great feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you wish. Just a great asset in learning this song that much easier. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Mika to teach you how to play this. Don't forget to grab the high G ukulele, and I'll catch you at the end of the video.
Hello everyone, my name is Mika Kane and welcome to another lesson video here at Rock Class 101. And I'm so excited to go ahead and talk about and teach my arrangement of Mad World. So one of the insights that I wanted to let you folks know about how I went ahead and arranged this is, one, I made it specifically for you folks. And two, more importantly, the angle that I wanted to go ahead and approach this arrangement. By nature, this is somewhat of a repetitive song. So I wanted to go ahead and use that to my advantage and be able to really work on the dexterity of our fingerstyle hand. Now, what I mean by that is because and due to the repetitive nature of the song, I want to go ahead and work on some bread and butter concepts with fingerstyle playing, or what I feel like are really important foundational techniques with fingerstyle playing. One of them is working on the roll technique, which I'll talk about more into the piece, learning how to pluck all three notes at the same time, but also learning how to dedicate your fingers to one, finger per string. So middle finger on the A string, index on the E string, and then the thumb being on the top two strings. And then learning how to pluck double notes in different orientations. So like the bottom two strings, the middle two strings, and then again, putting it together with rolls and putting it together with plucking all at the same time with three fingers. So you'll notice all of these things as we start to go through the piece, and I hope that this piece will, of course, bring you joy because it's a great piece, but also at the end of it, you'll hopefully gain more dexterity in your fingerstyle playing through this piece. So I'm so excited to go ahead and get started. If you guys are ready, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this piece. Now, before we go ahead and take a look at measure ones, one important thing that I want to go ahead and explain before we jump into the piece. So one of the main focuses that I want you folks to keep in mind in this piece is that we're going to go ahead and really work on the dexterity of our fingerstyle hand, or for me, the right hand that's doing all the picking. So for me, that means I like to assign each of my three fingers that I use certain strings. So anytime I'm going to pluck the C or the G string or the top two strings, I like to use my thumb, so like this. Anytime you want to pluck the E or the second string, I like to use my index finger, just like this. And then anytime I want to pluck the bottom A or the first string, I like to use my middle finger like that. So as we're reading the tab, whether we have to pluck together or we have to do the roll technique or we have to pluck individual strings, you want to go ahead and try your best to make sure that you're using specific fingers for specific strings just so we can keep things efficient and consistent. as we go through this piece. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into measure 1. So if we look at this rhythmically, we do see a lot of eighth notes. In fact, we only see eighth notes, so great. We don't have to think too much about rhythm, right? So now we can go ahead and look at the very first chord that we have to hold, which is the F minor chord, right? So the F minor chord looks a little something like this, where your index finger is on fret 3 A string, your middle finger is on the fret 4 E string, and then your ring finger is on the fret 5 of the C string. I like to call this building your stairs. So 1, 2, 3, you can walk up the stairs just like this from the 3rd fret on. Now, this is normally how I would want to hold an F minor chord, but it's all about context. And for me, I like to look ahead whenever I'm trying to learn a piece or I'm looking at tabs. So in a normal kind of setting, this is how I would hold F minor. But if we go ahead and take a look at 1 and 2, beat 2, there's a 3, the 4, 3, 3. There's that 3 on the 3rd fret of the E string. So the fact that I'm going to have to either bring my middle finger back or I'm going to have to put my index there tells me that if I hold and start off the song with this F minor and this orientation, I'm going to have to do something, whether, again, moving my middle finger back, or I'm going to have to bring my index finger up to hit that. So one way you can go ahead and account for this is we can go ahead and take our index finger and just bend it so it's hitting the bottom 2 frets of the the bottom 2 strings of the 3rd fret like that. And then we can keep the middle and the ring finger in the same position. So the only difference is this, that index finger hitting the bottom 2 strings like that. Now that allows us to just lift the middle finger up, and now we can go ahead and activate that 3rd fret, which is the beat 1 and 2 right there. And then we can keep everything else the same in that orientation. So if we go through the notes, we're just gonna hit the 4, then the 3, and then lift the middle finger up to hit the 3, put the middle finger back down to hit the 4, and then hit the C string for 5, and then lift that middle finger up to hit that 3. Now, this ring finger right here, we can go ahead and slide this to the 3rd fret on the C string, and then we can go ahead and drop the middle finger to hit that 2 on that 4 and that last 2 of measure 1, just like that. Okay, so if we put everything together, without trying to think about, playing in time or anything, just gonna go ahead and hit the 4, 3, 3, 4, 5, 3, slide down that 3, and then hitting the 2 with that middle finger, just like that. So in rhythm, we can go ahead and go 3 and 4 and. Just like that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the measure 2. So that 2 nicely sets us up for the B flat chord that we're going to have to play in measure 2. So all we have to do is we can keep our middle finger there. We can go ahead and put our index finger down on the bottom 2 strings of the 1st fret. So now we have the dreaded B flat chord, everyone's favorite chord, yeah? So we have this B flat chord. Now we have quarter notes, so we can go ahead and just hold each one for a quarter note until we get to the back end of the measure. So we can go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So for beat 4, because we have 2 eighth notes, we're going to have to make sure we hit that 4. And I like to use my middle finger to hit that 4 on the 4 and. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We have to hit that E string on the 4th fret. And that's going to go ahead and set us up for measure 3. So we're on that, we have a tie between on the 4 and to the 1, right? So we're going to go ahead and hold that 4th fret, and then on the 1 and, you're going to go ahead and hit that 3rd fret. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and go back to holding the index finger on the bottom 2 strings like this, and play the first 2 beats of measure 3. If I were to just go based off sound, count myself in, I would just do something like this over and over again. So 3 and 4 and. One more time, just so we can hear it again. So 3 and 4 and.
1, 2, 3, 4 and 2 and
so on. So once we arrive there to the F minor, we can go ahead and if we go through the rest of the notes of this measure 3, then we know we're already in this position where we're holding the 4 from the previous measure. Then we can go ahead and pluck that 3 on the A string, and then lift the middle finger up. Let's pluck the 3, pluck the 4 by putting the middle finger back down, pluck the 5 on the C string, pluck the E string, but lift that middle finger up to hit the 3, and then drop it for the 4. And then now I like to go ahead and take this finger, my index, and slide it back to 1. And then on measure 4, we can go ahead and just drop that middle finger on the 2nd fret just like that. So if we go ahead and try to play measure 3, already acknowledging that that 4 is already there, so I can count as if we already just plucked it on the end. So if we go, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's what measure 4 would sound like in tandem with measure 3. So measure 4, more straightforward, just quarter notes, and we're just pretty much sounding off that B flat chord, just like that. So let's go ahead and play the entire intro or section A, measures 1 through 4, just like this. All right, let's go ahead and set ourselves up. All right, here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... just like that. So little syncopation in there, but those eighth notes help it to drive it forward. So let's go ahead and move on to section B. So here is the verse of the song. So let's go ahead and turn our attention to measure 5. All right. So now we have the same F minor chord. And the good thing is we don't need to orientate ourselves like this, holding the F minor chord like this, because we don't need to hit a 3 ever in measure 5. So we can just go ahead and hold the F minor chord just like that. So build your stairs on the 3rd fret, just like that, 3, 4, 5. All right. Now, if you folks notice a little squiggly line with an arrow in the upwards direction, that indicates what I like to think of the roll technique. So the roll technique is you're going to take all 3 of your fingers, your thumb, index, middle finger. You're going to line all of them up on the bottom 3 strings, and you're going to go ahead and roll them together. So like roll through the strings like that. So notice how I'm not plucking it together. So like 4, 3, 4, 5, like this. If you like to be a little more visual about it, piano is like pressing all 3 white keys at the same time. You want to imagine that you're going to pluck that, your pinky, then your middle, then your thumb. So it's like you're rolling over with the piano keys. Same thing with the ukulele. You're not going to pluck all 3 strings at once. You're going to roll over all 3 strings. And the quicker you can do it, the more of that kind of sound you're going to get. If you're too slow with the roll, it sounds like an arpeggio, like a really fast arpeggio. So you want to do your best to try and make the notes as close together as possible, like that. This is a good kind of sound for a roll. And it gives it a different kind of texture. I'd like to think like this gives it a different sound than just plucking it together. You get one sound when you pluck it together versus you get kind of this really fast series of sound when you roll off the notes like that. Okay, so if you take a look at the whole entirety of the B section or the verse section, all of those 3 note chords have the squiggly arrow line next to it on the left side. So that means all of these you're gonna go ahead and try and practice this roll technique. Now, in the beginning, for those of you who feel like, oh, Mika, this is the first time I'm ever trying to do a roll technique, it's really difficult to try and get it really quickly. This is one of those things where you can go ahead and just practice it and try to build up your speed on the side. You don't technically have to do it through this song like, oh man, I can't move past measure 5 because I can't, get this. You could go ahead and just pluck it all at the same time if you want, just in the beginning, but knowing that if you want to get the most amount of reps and the most amount of content out of this, then if you can go ahead and practice the roll at those sections then or those moments, then that would be really awesome. Okay, so with that out of the way, you can go ahead and roll. So this is a quarter note, so 1 and then now we have 8th notes throughout the remainder of measure 5. So we can go ahead and just pluck the 5, 5, 4, 4, 5, 5 on the C and the E strings respectively. So it's going to sound like this. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and just like that. Okay. Now moving on to measure 6, we're going to go ahead and hold our A flat chord. So we're going to go ahead and for me personally, I like to bar the whole entire 3rd fret. I'm just used to holding this A flat chord like this, technically like an A flat add 2 or add 9 kind of chord, but don't worry about that. I like to go ahead and hold it like this, but if you want to just hit the bottom 3 strings, then that's perfectly fine too. I'm from the realm where if you don't have to hit or pluck that string, then you don't have to be accountable for it. So meaning you don't need to you don't need to bar the entire fret if you're never going to pluck the G string. So you could get away with just hitting the strings that you're going to hit, which is the bottom three. For me, I'm just used to holding it like this. So whatever works for you folks, then that'll be perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bar that third fret. And we're going to go ahead and do a roll on that A flat chord, 3, 4, 3. Now, this is an eighth note, so we're going to go ahead and get some syncopation action right here on that first beat of measure 6. So we're going to roll it. So if you're counting it, it's going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So this is where it gets a little weird and syncopated, because now we're going to be playing on the 1 and 2 and it's always fun to play in syncopated rhythm. It can be a little tricky if you're trying to count out and feel out the beats of the song. So again, like I mentioned earlier, I like to kind of just hear what it sounds like. That way we don't have to, we don't have to like trip over ourselves like 1 and 2, and then we get frustrated by that. So let me go ahead and just play measure 6. That way you guys can hear what it sounds like. All right, so if I count myself in, so 3 and 4 and. Just like that. Okay, one more time. 3 and 4 and. Just like that. Measure 7, we're going to go ahead and orientate ourselves like this with an E flat chord. So we're going to go on the first fret, index finger, middle finger on fret 3, C string, and then ring finger right below that, fret 3, E string like this. Now, when I hold an E flat chord, I try to turn my hand towards the left side or towards the headstock side of the instrument. If you're trying to hold an E flat chord where your fingers are straight and parallel with the frets, it's gonna be really awkward to try and squeeze those two fingers into that middle of the fret 3. So by turning your hand, you're actually allowing your fingers to be able to fit in between the frets like that. All right, so for the E flat chord, we're gonna go ahead and do the roll. Now, the great thing about measure 7 is that rhythmically it's the exact same as measure 6. So it's going to sound like this. So if I count myself in, 3 and 4 and. So you want to go ahead and pluck that or roll the E flat chord and then pluck the A string. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then that open 0 is on that G string using our thumb. Okay? Now moving on into measure 8, we're going to go ahead and have somewhat of the same syncopated feel, but on the back end we have 3/8 notes instead of the dotted quarter note. All right, so we're going to go ahead and hold our B flat chord like this and roll. And then again, if we just go based off hearing what it sounds like, it's going to sound like this, counting myself in. So 3 and 4 and. Again, you can hear that, those 3/8 notes at the end. So let's do it one more time because the ending's a little different from the previous two measures. All right, here we go. 3 and 4 and. Just like that, okay? Now, counting it out, it's gonna be 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Just like that, okay? So let's go ahead and put together measures 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, there we go. Let's start off on our F minor chord. All right, here we go. 3 and 4 and. And then land into measure 9 of the F minor chord. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to measure 9. So now I have some good news for you folks. So the nature of Mad World is that it's a very repetitive song. So that can work in our advantage in terms of we have 16 measures total. If we look from measure 5 to measure 20, that's the entirety of section B or the verse section. But if we go ahead and look at measures 9 through 12, it's actually a lot more similar than it seems. So for me, I like to personally highlight my notes so that I have visual cues when or notes or my tabs. I have visual cues when I'm reading my tabs, so my eyes can capture I highlighted yellow, so that means maybe it's a different rhythm, or maybe I have to pay attention because I have to pluck 2 notes at once, and that's going to be the case for these measures 9, 10, 11, and 12. So if we take a moment to look at measure 9 and we compare it to measure 5, the only difference is that if we look at measure 9, we have a 5 and a 4 now on the beat 3. So for me, I like to highlight that because I have to pay attention. Like, okay, I have to pluck both strings now at the same time. Now I have to pluck the C and the E string at the same time. So measure 9 is played exactly like measure 5, except now I have to pluck both strings at the same time. All right. Now, if we look at measure 10, it's going to be, again, exactly the same as measure 6. But now if you look at 2 and, the third, the 3, and the 4, you're adding that extra 4. So you're plucking the 3 and the 4, and then you're plucking that E and the C string at the same time. Now, the good thing about these double notes is that you don't have to alter your fingering on the left hand or your chord hand. You don't have to drop any additional fingers to play this. Again, this comes more from the dexterity of the right hand recognizing, oh man, I have to pluck the A and the E, and then I have to pluck the C and the E strings at the same time. So if we play measure 10, it sounds something like this now with the doubles. So we can go. So the difference with adding doubles now is that you get a fuller sound because you're hearing 2 notes at once versus just 1 note, say in measure 5 and 6. Now measure 9 and 10, we have those double notes, or even on this F minor chord, we have that versus just that, right? So if we move on to measure 11, same thing. E flat is measure 7 and measure 11 are identical to each other. The only thing that we have to make a note of is that 1-3. Now I'll go ahead and highlight that 1-3. So now you want to pluck the A and the E string at the same time. So it sounds like. So I got to pluck both the A and the E string at the same time. And then now if we go ahead and look at measure 12, then we got to go ahead and same thing, roll that B flat chord. And then now we got to pluck both the A and the E. So I go ahead and highlight that. And then the same ending where you have your middle finger on the 4, index on the 3, and then ring finger on that C string. And that leads us nicely into that F minor chord. So let's go ahead and play measures 9 through 12. Again, it's pretty much identical to measures 5 and 8. 9 and 12 is the same thing, just got to be wary of those double notes. So this is, again, where a lot of the dexterity training and work will come in handy because you have to recognize that, on measure 9, that 5 and 4, I have to pluck it together. On measure 10, I have to pluck that 4 and the 3, so I have to pluck the A and the E string together. And being able to read the tabs and also for your eyes are recognizing it, goes to your brain through your hand, and then you have to be able to analyze that and be able to play it. Okay, so measures 9 through 12. Here we go. 3 and 4 and. Just like that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to measure 13. All right, so I have more good news for you folks. So if we go ahead and look at measures 13, 14, 15, and 16, it's exactly 95% exactly the same as measures 5 through 8. The only thing that's going to be different now is if we take a look at measure 13, rather than starting off with a roll on that F minor chord, you're still going to go ahead and outline that F minor chord. But now we're going to go ahead and pluck that C string, that 5th fret, and we're going to have to pluck that for a quarter note. So 1 and then that 4-3 pluck on the bottom 2 strings of that F minor chord. That's going to be, now we have to play everything as 8th notes. So if we go ahead and count ourselves in, measure 13 would sound something like this. So 3 and 4 and 1. Just like that. So you have this syncopated feel. Well, not so much syncopated because you're playing on the downbeat, but you're kind of separating that F minor chord and you're kind of continuing that momentum after you pluck that double note right there. Okay, so again, the rest of the measure 13, it's the same as measure 5. You just got to pluck the 5 and then the 4 on the E string, and then 5 on the C string. Now, everything else, measure 14, is the same as measure 6. Measure 15 is the same as measure 7, and measure 16 is the same as measure 8. So we can go ahead and play it as normal. So let's go ahead and practice measure 13 one more time, and then we can go ahead and put measures 13 to 16 all together. All right? So counting myself in on measure just 13. Here we go. 3 and 4 and 1. Let's do that one more time. 3 and 4 and. All right, perfect. So now let's go ahead and put 13 and through 16 together. Here we go. 3 and 4 and. All right. Okay, so we're almost done with section B, or the verse section. Go ahead and look at measure 17. So here is more good news. I see in my arrangements, I just bring a whole bunch of good news for you folks, right? So in measure 17 through 20, it is exactly the same as measures 9 through 12. It's a mirrored copy. It's 100% the same. You guys can double check for yourselves. But measure 9 is just like measure 17. Measure 10 is just like measure 18. Measure 11 is just like measure 19. And measure 12 is just like measure 20. So with that being said, let's go ahead and play measures 17 to 20. And it should sound familiar to you folks. All right, here we go. 3 and 4 and. Just like so. Okay, so real quickly, let's go ahead and play the B section or the verse section all at once. Measures 5 through 20. You guys can either play along or you can just kind of hear how everything sounds like when put together. Okay, so one thing I would like to take to note for you folks is that with repetitiveness comes responsibility as well, because when a piece repeats itself over and over again, and there's only minor differences between, say, this measure versus this whole line of music, you want to be very aware of where those changes are and then where everything else is, played the same. That's why having tabs with highlights is very beneficial, because you can see when those highlights come up, it perks your attention up. It draws your attention and you want to pay close attention to, oh, there's doubles here. Oh, the rhythm is different here. So I'll use different highlight colors. Yellow for maybe the double notes, maybe green for when, one part of the rhythm changes from another measure, and so on. So, for me, as I play this, being transparent, I have my notes highlighted. So it helps me to recognize and see where the differences are in the piece itself. For me, I don't like to think of it as cheating. I like to think of it more as whatever helps you to get you to play the piece. This is not for a competition. This is not to, try to prove anything to anyone else. This is just between you and the music, right? So whatever you can do to help you folks out with being able to be more successful with the piece, please use all the advantages you can. So highlighting, very big piece of advice I can pass on to you folks. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play the whole entire verse section, measures 5 through 20. All right, here we go. 3 and 4 and. Just like that. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the C section, or the chorus section of the piece. So now this is where things are going to go into overdrive. So this is where our dexterity of our right hand will really be put to the test, because there's a lot of doubles, a lot of triples. So what does a triple mean? So if you take a look at all of these measures, pretty much the whole entire second page, we're not going to be doing any more of that roll technique like that. We notice that there's none of that squiggly arrow up button or line next to any of the chords. So that means we're going to go ahead and pluck. So like, for example, on measure 21, you're going to pluck that 5, 4, 3 at the same time. We don't need to apply that roll technique anymore. So now we have to balance not only plucking individual notes, and now not only doubles, but now also plucking 3 notes at once. So again, we're going to go into overdrive mode, not to intimidate or to scare you folks, but more so as, all right, I have more opportunity to really challenge the dexterity of my right hand and being able to conquer something like this. So let's dive right into the section. So measure 21, same F minor chord, we can go ahead and hold it in this fashion. And the good thing about the rest of this measure, measure 21, we're not changing or altering any of the fingerings of this F minor chord. So we don't need to change this or this or this. We don't need to put the pinky down. We just have to be mindful of when those double notes come in. So if we start on beat 1, we go ahead and pluck it as a quarter note. And then the rest of the measure, D2 and 3 and 4 and are all eighth notes. So if we go ahead and pluck the 5 like this, pluck the 5 again. Now we have to pluck the 5 and 4. And then now only pluck the 4. And then now we have to pluck the A and the E, or the 4 and the 3, and then pluck the A string. So there is somewhat of a sequence to it, right? So we have to pluck the C string, then C and E, E, E and A, and then A. So there's somewhat of a pattern. And it sounds really cool because it sounds like the song is building up to, and it does, it builds up to this nice B flat major chord on the next measure, right? So measure 21 is going to sound something like this. 3 and 4 and. Again, because we had those double notes, it creates a fuller sound versus if we just went. Now we have more. There's a little more power and a little more momentum going into measure 22, where it really brightens up and you hit this B flat major chord. Okay, so with that, measure 22, we're going to go ahead, and just like I was saying earlier, when you can hold the A flat chord by barring the 3rd fret and putting your middle finger down the 4th fret, the B flat chord can go ahead and just hold this just like that. Bar the 5th fret, put our middle finger down on the E string. Again, we're not plucking that G string, so because we're not plucking it, we don't have to be accountable for it, meaning you don't even have to bar the whole thing. But for me, I'm just used to doing something like this. But if you want to go ahead and just hold the bottom 3 strings because it's easier, because bar chords suck, then that is A-okay. So whatever works for you folks, all right? So measure 22, you're going to go ahead and pluck at the same time. And then again, we have more of this syncopation little nonsense going on here, but it makes it sound cool and makes it sound fun, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and play it for you, and then I'll count it out so that you can see how everything is broken down, right? So let me go ahead and just play it for you and go ahead and listen. All right, 3 and 4 and. Let's play it one more time, all right, for listening purposes. 3 and 4 and. Okay, and now let's go ahead and count it out as you're playing it so we can see how all the beats are subdivided, all right? So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that. Let's do it one more time. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that. Okay, so nice syncopated feel. We really just have to be aware of that quarter note right on beat 1 and that 6th fret right there. Because after that, everything kind of smooths on. It's all 8th notes that you can just finish off the rest of the measure for 22. All right, so now let's move on into measure 23. We can go ahead and hold that F minor chord just like that. And just like measure 13, we had that same breakup of that F minor chord. So now we're going to hold the F minor chord, but we're going to hit that 5th fret on the C string and hold it for a quarter note. So 1 and 2, and then we can go ahead and pluck the 4, 3, or the bottom 2 strings like that. So just like that. And again, just like measure 21 and even measure 22, I didn't mention it, but it's one of those things where you just have to hold the F minor chords. I know there's so many notes, there's a cluster of notes all happening all at 8th note speed. You don't have to change any of the fingerings or put your pinky down. You go ahead and just, keep this here, and all of that dexterity work is going to come out on that right hand. So if I were to go ahead and play through measure 23, you hit the 5 for that quarter note, and then the rest of it's all 8th note. So we can go ahead and pluck the 4, 3 like that, and then pluck the 5 on the C string, pluck the 5 and 4 C and E string, then pluck the 4 on the E string, then pluck 4 and 3 on the E and the A, and then pluck that A string. So with measure 23, it's going to sound like this, counting myself in. So 3 and 4 and... Let's do it one more time. 3 and 4 and... Okay, so let's go ahead and move on into measure 24. Now, measure 24 is really just a flurry of notes. Pretty much every other note, you're going to be switching from single notes to double notes to single notes to double notes. Again, really trying to work on our dexterity of our right hand. All right, so we're going to hold that same B flat chord like this on that 5th fret, and then the 6th on the E string. So then we're going to go ahead, and it's all 8th notes. So we can go ahead and pluck that B flat chord, pluck the E string, then the C and the E, then the E string, then the E and the A, and then the A string, then the C and the E, and then the E string, just like that. So it sounds like this. You know, it's a good tongue twister if you want to go. A good tongue twister if you try to play it really fast. Thankfully, this song, you don't have to play it that fast. We can play it at a nice, comfortable speed. So measure 24 is going to sound like this, counting in 3 and 4 and... Let's play that one more time because this is trickier to manage all of that right hand shenanigans. All right, so here we go. 3 and 4 and... Okay, now let's go ahead and put together measure 21 through 24. All right, so starting with that F minor chord, here we go. 3 and 4 and... Just like that, okay? Now let's go ahead and move on to measure 25. So again, I bring good news. Just like how in the verse section, there's a lot of repetitiveness. Thankfully, in the chorus section, well, wouldn't you know, there's a lot more repetitiveness in the chorus section as well. So if we look at measure 25 and we compare it to measure 21, everything is the same except the beginning two notes. So essentially, rather than plucking that 5-4-3 of the F minor chord at the same time, we got to go ahead and pluck that 5 now with a quarter note, and then we can go ahead and continue on with all 8 notes for the rest of measure 25. So you could say that measure 25 and measure 23 is exactly the same. Hopefully it's not to cause confusion, but just to see how many similarities there are in this arrangement. Measure 25 and measure 23 are exactly the same. So measure 25, again, that quarter note on that C string, and then the 8th note on the 4 and 3, and then you go ahead and pluck the C string, pluck the C and the E, pluck the 4 and the E string, pluck the 4 and the 3 and the E and the A string, and then pluck the A string. So it's going to be just like that. So one more time, let me count myself in. 3 and 4 and... Just like that. All right, now measure 26. Measure 26 is the same exact thing as measure 22. So measure 26 is going to sound like this. 3 and 4 and... Just like that. And now if we move on to measure 27, it's exactly the same as measure 23. So we already know how to play measure 27. It's going to sound just like this. Now with a count in, 3 and 4 and... All right, and then measure 28, voila, it's the same thing as measure 24. So we've already played this already. A lot of that, the flurry of notes, right? So here we go, counting myself in, 3 and 4 and... Just like that. So if we go ahead and play measures 25 to 28, it's pretty much just like what we played measure 21 to 24, but we just got to be careful about those first 2 notes and measure 25 with that quarter and then the flurry of 8 notes, all right? So measure 25 to 28, here we go. 3 and 4 and... just like that. All right, so now let's go ahead and move on to measure 29. Now, this is where things change, so it's not going to be the same as the previous measures. So the good thing with measure 29 is just like the other measures, when we start off with this F minor chord, just like this, we don't have to alter any of the fingerings. Again, we don't have to add the pinky, we don't have to move the fingers around. We just have to see where all the numbers are lined up on the string. So beat 1, and it's all eighth notes too, so we can just go ahead and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? So you're going to start off with plucking the A and the E string, then the A string, then plucking the C and the E, then the E, and then C string, C string, E string, A string. So it sounds something like this. It's nice because it kind of goes up and down with the sound, yeah? So counting myself in, 3 and 4 and that's measure 29. Measure 30, we're going to go ahead and play a B flat chord, not in this orientation, but more in the bass position. So we're going to go ahead and, for now, we can just go ahead and put our first finger or our index finger on the first fret on the bottom 2 strings, and we can go ahead and pluck that. If you guys want to go ahead and put that middle finger down in preparation, knowing that beat 2, you have that 2, 1, 5, which is going to look like this. You're going to have to eventually put that middle finger down. So you could go ahead and just have your index down and then eventually put it down, or if you're more comfortable with just dropping the whole B flat chord, so you're ready for that beat 2, that 2, 1, 5 chord right there. It's still B flat chord. Okay, so let's go ahead and take it nice and slow. So we're going to go ahead and move into this position, pluck the A and the E string, and then now we're going to just hit that 1 on that A string. And then we're going to have to drop our pinky. So we're going to hold the B flat chord and drop our pinky on 5, and we're going to have to pluck the C, E, and A string at the same time, or 2, 1, 5, 2, 1, 5, just like that. Then pluck that 5th fret still, and then now let go of the pinky to hit the 1, 1. Like that, and then now we're gonna just hit that 1 on that A string, and then pluck that open G string, that's 0, and then 4 on that E string. And we have another one of those cases where we have that syncopated sound where on that 4, and we gotta go ahead and hit that 4, and because we have an 8th note tied, that line tied to an 8th note, it's gonna sound like a quarter note, but it's awkward on where it's placed rhythmically. All right, so again, it's one of those situations where I'll play it so that you can hear what it sounds like, and then we can try to break down the rhythmic part of it, all right? So measure 30. So we can go real slow. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and so on. Let's do that one more time. We'll go into the first 1 or 2 notes into measure 31. So that, beat 1 and is you're just going back to the F minor chord, plucking that E and the A string, and then the C and the E string. All right, so we can try add that in just so we can put in context that syncopation between measure 30 and 31. All right, here we go. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and so on. All right, so now without counting, I'll count myself in. This is what it sounds like. 3 and 4 and so on. Okay, now let's go ahead into measure 31. So we already acknowledged that we're going to be on the 4 right here. So I'll count in, and when I count 1, I won't play it because technically I'm still holding over that 4 from the previous measure. So I'm pretty much going to start playing on that 1 and the 4, 3, just like that. All right, so here we go. And then we can put measure 30 and 31 together so we can hear the whole thing in context. All right, so measure 31. So counting myself in, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. All right, so now looking at the notes, again, we're just holding the F minor chord just like this. So we're gonna pluck that A and the E, the 4, 3. Then we gotta pluck the C and the E, or the 5 and 4. And then pluck the E string 4. And then the C string, the 5, 5, pluck the E and the A string. And then now we gotta drop our pinky on the 6th fret just like this. And then that's gonna lead into measure 32 on that B flat chord. So before we jump into measure 32, let's go ahead and put measure 30 and 31 and put it together so that we can hear what that syncopation sounds like with the full picture. All right, here we go. 3 and 4 and right, let's do that one more time to get another rep in. All right, here we go. 3 and 4 and. And to measure 32. All right, so now let's go ahead and finish off measure 32. So we're going to go ahead and hold that B flat chord again. So bar the 5th fret, have your middle finger down on the E string, pluck that together. And these are all 8th notes, or the first 1 and 2 and all 8th notes. And then we have a quarter note, and then we have more of that syncopation again. So let's just jump right into it. So 32, you're going to pluck and then hit the 6. Then on the E string, 5 on the C string, 6 on the E string, and then pluck the 6 and 5 together, and it's going to be a quarter note. And then after that, you have the 2 8th notes at the end. And then you're going to go ahead and pluck the 5, and then hit that 4, and slide that middle finger back to the 4, just like that. Okay, so measure 32 is going to sound like this. 3 and 4 and. Let's do that one more time. I'll even count it out because the rhythm is changing in this one compared to the other measures. So here we go. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that. So before we move on to the outro section, let's go ahead and play measure 29 through 32. All right, so here we go. 3 and 4 and. Just like that. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the final section, section D, or the outro section. So I bring more good news. We started, the whole middle and the whole back half of this lesson all filled with good news outside of some of the syncopation stuff that's going on here. But I bring more good news for you folks. This outro is very similar to the intro of the piece that we started off in the section A. And just to give some background on why I arranged it like this, for me, I always find it cool when the song begins with a cool little intro, and then maybe the song might not end, the same. It might fade out. They might do their own thing, in the outro. But for me, because I was able to arrange this in my own manner, I love when they have a nice little intro. And I would love to take that intro and put it in the outro, because in my head, the arrangement kind of comes full circle. You have your intro, and then you flesh the piece out with your verse, your chorus, maybe other sections, and then it winds down, and then all of a sudden you're ending with what you started with in the piece. So this outro is very similar, 90% similar to the intro that we did in the beginning of this piece, outside of the final notes that we will use to end the song and to wrap it all or tie it all up together. Okay, so into the outro, we're going to go ahead and go back to holding the F minor chord like this, because we have that pesky little 3 on the E string that we have to pluck, and then drop the middle finger to hit the 4 again. So we're going to go ahead, hold the F minor chord like this, and then we're going to go ahead and pluck all the notes. So again, if we're already holding that 4 over from the 4 and measure 32, measure 33, you would start on beat 1, and then and would be the 3 on the A string, let go of the middle finger to hit the 3, and then drop it to hit the 4 on the E string, and then hit the C string 5, and then let go of that middle finger to hit the 3 on the E string, have that ring finger drop back to the 3rd fret on the C string, and then have that second finger or the middle finger on that 2nd fret of the C string. They should sound very familiar to you folks because it's just like the intro. All right. So putting it all together. So if I were to count myself in, it would be something like this. And again, on beat 1, I'm not going to play it because this is technically coming in. You already played that 4 and it's still ringing over, right? So if I were to go 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that. So one more time. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and that's what measure 33 would sound like. Measure 34, just like the intro, we're going to go ahead on beat 1. We're having that B flat chord like this. Beat 1, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and again, we got to go ahead and jump to that 4 a little early because it's on the 4 and, right? So holding the B flat chord, just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like so. Okay, now measure 35. Again, we're having that, eighth note to the eighth note tied in. So it's like a quarter note. So you're holding it over, it's spilling over, and then you go ahead and it's the exact mirror of the third measure of the outro, right? Or sorry, of the intro, right? So if we go ahead and try to combine measure 34 and 35, we'll go really slowly. But again, measure 35, we played this and covered this in the intro. So it's going to sound like this. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that. Now without counting out loud. Here we go. 3 and 4 and yeah, just like that. All right. And now to finish off with measure 36, we're going to go ahead and go back to the B flat chord. And this is where it changes a little bit from the intro on that measure 4. We're going to go ahead and a quarter note on the 2, and then a quarter note on the 1 1, quarter note on the 2. And then on the 4, you're going to go ahead and pluck that open string. And then we're going to play that final F minor chord like this with the index on the first fret G string, middle finger on the first fret E string, and then pinky on that third fret A string. And then you're going to go ahead and have your fingerstyle hand pluck that G, E, and A string like that to sound off the F minor chord. So we're kind of coming in early. We're jumping it a little early. So on that beat 4, pluck that 0. And then on that beat and, the 4 and, you're going to go ahead and hold that F minor chord like that. And then it spills over to measure 37 to the whole note. And it's just going to be the whole entire, we end the song like this. So you can go ahead and throw that aloha shaka right there after you finish the piece. Like, all right, I finished the piece. Just like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and play the outro in its entirety. So let's take it from measure 32 just so we can come in. All right, so it's going to be 3 and 4 and... And don't forget to throw the shaka at the end.
All right, guys, so this week's ukulele lesson was a lot of fun. This is a really beautiful tune, and I have to say that Mika did an amazing job at capturing that vibe, that haunting vibe that is heard in the Gary Jules version of this tune. So just a beautiful piece and a lot of fun to play on the ukulele. Now I wanted to give you a friendly reminder before we wrap up that if you did want to get the tabs to print off and keep for your records, that was available at this link right here. Or you can go to the site rockclass101.com, do a search for the song's name. Don't forget too, on that page was the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer. So you can literally hit play, watch the tab scroll across in real time, highlight bars, loop sections, slow it down, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed learning this tune, and we will catch you in the next lesson. Take care.